Hello, Muse. It is I, your best bud, your pal, your chum, your BFF, your pen pal to the world. Whatever I am to you. Hi. How you doing, buddy? So, I have something that I do want to talk about with you today, and it's really kind of cool. Now, I don't know if you, well, of course you know, you're my muse. Durhay. So, I just, within the last couple of days, finished the first draft of Fear. Now, this is the new series that I'm writing for Devil Dog Press. And it's pretty cool. I think it's a fairly fresh and unique take on the post-apocalyptic genre. That's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is this. I mention my style of writing a lot, my technique, which I call the butterfly effect, a very cause and effect style of writing. I write without a net, in other words, no outline. I just start going. I have an idea for a book, and I put finger to keyboard, and I start typing, and I do that every day, usually writing between 1,000 and 2,000 words a day. And with that method, I string together enough chapters to create a story in a book. Now, because I don't have any idea where these books are going to go, sometimes I kind of write myself into issues. And I have discovered one of the issues that I want to chat about with you after writing Fear. Now, here's kind of how it works. So, because of the way I write, I dive on in head first, and I just plow through, and I allow the story to evolve organically, and the cause and the effect eventually creates a story arc. Now, one of the things I discovered with Fear is, one of the things that I do is that as soon as I get done with the first draft, like the day after I finish, I write the end, I go back to the beginning and I start rereading immediately. And I'll tell you why I do that. And I'll tell you why immediately going back through your book is important, crucial when you write in this method. So I finish the book, and the next day I go back and I start rereading it. And the primary purpose of me rereading it is to clean it up so I can then send it to beta readers. I always send my books to beta readers before I send it to my editor, because if I send it to my editor, or to beta readers, if I send it to my editor and I go back and forth and we polish it up and we clean it up, then I send it to beta readers. If the beta readers say, you've got a problem here, you need to fix this, then all of a sudden I am injecting possible problems that my editor will have to then go back through and fix after the fact. So I like to do beta readers first and then the editor. So I always make sure that I do another pass or a first reread so I can clean up some of the obvious mistakes in grammar and misspellings and wrong words or properly or improperly formatted sentences or just poorly worded sentences and repeated words. Fix those, and then I send it to beta readers. Now, here's the other benefit of going back through this immediately. So I start reading it, and almost within the first couple of pages of the book, I realized that I created the seed of an idea that maybe not very quickly, but evolved into something different by the end of the book. And I'm not talking about a part of the storyline. I'm talking about something. And I don't want to give anything away, but for instance, okay, so I'll give away a little bit of something here. So at first, what I called this thing that the big bad had, I called it the hunger. Well, I think I only called it the hunger once, because shortly after that, I started referring it to the maddening. And I stuck with that. But when I went back and reread that draft and I saw the hunger, I realized that that was a better name for it. Because of what these things have become, I believe it's just a better nomenclature for them. So as I'm rereading it, I'm replacing the maddening with the hunger. And there were other things, like, for example, one of the characters that was two of the characters that were introduced, for some odd reason, one was introduced here at the very beginning and one was introduced later. And for some odd reason, they had very similar backgrounds. And I didn't realize that until I reread it again. So immediately I was like, well, I want to keep this background for this character, but I'll change it for this one. So I had to rewrite a little section here for this other character so that his background was significantly different from his, because you don't want to have, because one of the things I try to do with my books is limit the amount of characters in them, because I find, at least for me, characters that are books that have a massive amount of characters can become somewhat of a trudge to read. It's hard to get. It's easy to get those characters mistaken for one another. So when you limit yourself and you have fewer characters, it becomes easier for the reader to know who's doing what, who's who, and so on. So, but the problem is when you limit yourself to a few characters, like 5, 6, 7 characters, those characters have to be very different from one another. So I realized very quickly during this reread, got to fix that. And it was interesting because as I was reading it, I keyed in. I was like, wait a minute, that sounds really familiar. Why do I have this character with this background when I did the same thing later on? So easy fix. And now not all of these fixes are simple, because you develop this universe very quickly, but you allow it to evolve into something more specific. And then you have to make sure that in the beginning, what you have in the beginning matches what you have in the end. Now, why is it so important that you do this immediately, that you jump right back into the beginning as soon as you get done with the end? The reason being is because everything at the end is still fresh, and everything at the beginning is not fresh. Because, at least for me, it's usually between 2 and 3 months where I start and finish a first draft of a novel. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, everything I wrote at the beginning was, if I didn't keep reminding myself of that, which sometimes I do, if I don't keep reminding myself of that, then I'm going to forget it. So when I go back to the beginning, it's a refresher course for me. But it's important because to start right back over immediately, because all of that stuff on the end is fresh. So when you go start from the beginning again, you have an obvious comparison, and you can go, oh wait, no, I have to change this in the beginning because it becomes this in the end, and I don't want there to be any confusion. So, and the thing is, and this is where I think some writers have a problem. And I'm going to try to make this sound not so awful. Some writers think that every idea that comes out of their face is brilliant. And so they will have brilliant idea A, and then at the beginning of a book, and then at the end of the book, they'll have brilliant idea B. And sometimes those things don't jive very well. And some writers just simply don't want to give up on brilliant idea A, even though it conflicts with brilliant idea B, because they want to have two brilliant ideas. Well, the truth of the matter is you have to let your ego go. You have to set it aside, and if brilliant idea A conflicts with brilliant idea B, you either have to let brilliant idea A go, or you have to figure out a way to rework it in such a way that it works in conjunction with brilliant idea B. Now, that's not always the case. There are exceptions to every rule. There are times when you might want those conflicting brilliant ideas to create tension. But in some cases, they simply have to be able to form a cohesive whole. Otherwise, you're going to have readers who they start the book and they get to the end of the book and they're like, wait a minute. No, this person totally contradicted themselves in this book. That doesn't work. So you have to be willing, when you dive back in for the second read of the book, you have to be willing to go, I got to let go of this. And there's that famous phrase that a lot of people attribute Stephen King to, but it was actually prior to that. It was one of the beat poets, and I can't remember which beat poet it was. But the phrase is kill your darlings. You have to be willing to kill those darlings, even if it's an idea that you thought when you were writing it at the time, you thought, oh my gosh, this is going to set the world on fire. It's going to flip everything on its head and completely redefine the genre. Even that may be so, but if it doesn't work for your book, then you've got to let it go. You've got to be willing to say, sorry. However, save that idea. If you have to scrap that idea for this book, save it, and you might be able to use it in another book. But the truth of the matter is that you have to make sure that the beginning of the book and the end of the book sit well with one another. They have to be good bedfellows, because if they're not, then you've got a disconnect in your story or a disconnect in your characters. Yes, it's good that characters and story evolves, but it has to evolve naturally. It can't just all of a sudden, you can't have a character who thinks X, and then by the end of the story, they think 1. No, it's not binary. It's all very much shades of gray, but they can't just jump the shark or jump ship and be a completely different person by the end of your book. Let them evolve, let them change, but don't make them completely different. And at the same time, if you have conflicting plot points in your book or, subplots, then you've got to work those out. And it's important that you reread this. And that's one of the reasons why I insist, even though I usually feel very confident with a first draft, I insist that I read it again before I send it to beta readers. Now, that wasn't always the case. There was a period in my life early on as a new writer where I would finish a first draft of a book and go, it's ready, it's done, it's okay. I can send that on to my beta readers and they can read it. And of course, they're not going to have anything bad to say about it. So why do I even bother with beta readers? I'll just send it straight on to my editor. So forget that. But I learned my lesson. And of course, another lesson I have with beta readers, that another reason why I use more than one beta reader, is that if one beta reader says something negative about the book, it's an opinion. If more than one beta reader says the same bad thing about a book, it's an issue. So the lesson to be learned here is that as soon as you get done with the first draft of your book, especially if you write in a very cause and effect, organic, no outline method, is to immediately go back to the beginning and start all over. Start rereading it immediately. And then when you do send it out to beta readers, send it to more than one beta reader. 3 to 5 at least, at minimum. 5 is a good number, because if you get beyond 5, then all of a sudden you're having to juggle a lot of opinions and issues and stuff like that. So 5 is a good number. 3 is, I would say, minimum. And then if you get, when you get that feedback, You've got to set aside your ego and be willing to make changes. And you also, as you're reading that first draft again, you have to read it. You have to kind of step away from it. I know a lot of writers will finish with a first draft and then they go, I'm going to take a break from it. And I've done this before. Take a few weeks off from it and don't even look at it. And then you go back to it. But the problem with that is, which I clearly discovered with Fear, is that if I would have stepped back from it for a few weeks, I wouldn't be as familiar with the end of the book as I was when just jumping right back in. So I probably would not have caught some of these things at the beginning. So you see what I'm saying? So in the end, you have to trust yourself enough to let go and say, I'm going to fix all the problems that I'm sure that there are going to be. And you do it quickly so you are still familiar with the material. And that's kind of all I have to say this week, Muse. It's been exciting. This always excites me when I can go through, start rereading the first draft, and I find and I catch the issues, because those are less issues that beta readers have to trudge through. And I don't want to hand beta readers a problematic book. I want to hand beta readers the best possible manuscript that I can so they can enjoy it. The goal for me when I send a book to beta readers is simply for them to read it and enjoy it. And if they enjoy it, then I know that what I have written works. And then it's a matter of sending it to the editor and having them say, this doesn't work. But if a beta reader enjoys it, then I know that I'm onto something. So I always make sure that what I send to them is enjoyable and not problematic. Fortunately, Muse, you give me the ideas for the stories, and these ideas are generally pretty freaking awesome. Why? Why are those book ideas awesome? I'm giving you a hint there. You're not taking the hint, Muse. Come on. You know what it is. It is because you are awesome.